Hey, what's up, everybody? This is this week's Touch Base. I'm looking forward to chatting to you. It's been a busy year. It's been a busy week in general. And so I'm looking forward to just giving you some few key highlights. One of my big highlights was, of course, Bafana qualifying. Hey, these boys have done us proud. They're top of the group. They're going to the African Cup of Nations. That is going to be phenomenal. I am, though, worried about our cricket team. I think there needs to be a commission of inquiry into what's going on into cricket, because I love this team. I hope that the Proteas bounce back. The men's side needs to keep the flag going, and there's 2 series coming up after this. I think it's England and Pakistan, and so therefore we must make sure we do well. And on the other sports front, the Springboks, of course, are winning this weekend. Wales, we need to finish the job we started, and therefore we need to make sure that we win and win convincingly over the next. I'm so excited about the new young talent that is coming into the Springbok setup. I think that's exciting. Boapele Lefasi and so many other young players. I think it's phenomenal. So on the sports front, South Africa is winning and we keep going. Now, let's win on the politics front of the issue, because what I wanted to spend today talking about is a little bit about what is, in essence, this township economy we talk about. Let's define at the starting point what we are trying to unpack when we talk about townships. Apartheid legislation meant that we needed to put black South Africans particularly in townships, and therefore these were formalized as places for black South Africans to live in, and in certain instances as labor sending centers. I grew up in one such township, the Southwestern Township, or easily known as Soweto. And where I grew up, of course, spaza shops were part of our daily living. These were South African entrepreneurs. They're setting up shops, trying to make sure that they can provide items of food for citizens. But then as things progressed, I grew up with a mother who ran a small spaza shop, if you like. She sold eggs. They were uncooked eggs, but she was able to get large stocks of eggs and be able to sell them in townships. She did this and put me through school. Today, I am sitting here nearly working through multiple degrees, primarily because my mother hustled. She went ahead and did things. But it didn't just stop that industry there. I can remember as townships became more and more people started to work, the broader economy started to grow. We started to have people starting to make welding things, making steel gates and putting burglar bars, and that became a whole other industry. And of course, you can't help, if you go to a funeral kokasi, you will discover quite quickly that there are catering that takes place at the funeral, and so those businesses are starting to thrive. There are people who rent out tents and chairs and all sorts of those for weddings, for funerals, for all sorts of other functions. You also quickly realize more and more as the industries are becoming more diversified that it's not only those but undertakers and all of that. And then it grew. You had entrepreneurs like Bontate Maponya and so many others who set up bigger stores, general dealers as they were, in townships. So the question becomes, whilst we look at the township economy, I think we need to broaden the discussion. We need to have a vision for what a future township economy would look like. Let's not just narrow it to spaza shops. We make it seem as though it's a bit like this side thing. And of course, I'm not ignorant to the fact that many of these, in certain instances, spaza shops have become outsourced to immigrants, South Africans who sometimes own the house and then they rent it out to an immigrant, and an immigrant runs a spaza shop, etc., etc. I get all of that. But before we narrowly just say, okay, let's deal with immigrants through this thing, let us broaden and have a vision for a township economy. I've always thought the townships are, if I was betting on something, I would bet them. There's economic impetus in townships. You take a community like Mamelodi, already its GDP in certain instances is over 2 billion rand annually. Now, how many townships have got economic activity that is unaccounted for? You add to that the taxi infrastructure that occurs in townships, you could really have an incredible, vibrant economy. Secondly, I think that we need to think about how we stimulate those small businesses that are operating in townships to scale them up. rather than taking 500 million rands or whatever the government has appropriated, which is an insignificant amount of money in certain instances, could we say between the South African government and the private sector, we're going to match each other rand for rand, make it R1 billion, and then say to ourselves, let's go out into townships and invest in the ecosystem of the township economy. Let's make sure where there are food outlets that there's actually proper infrastructure, that people can use restrooms, and that if it's located near a taxi rank, more can be done. But more than that, let us make sure that for the welding business, I think about that as a building, or a furniture making business, it can go from employing 1 or 2 people to more people. When I lived in townships, did we call a plumber from elsewhere. They came from the township. And so giving those plumbing services, electrical services, all of that, an opportunity to participate in servicing the township is a powerful opportunity where we can give equipment, we can make sure that those businesses not only become somewhat regulated, registered, they can also be able to create employment, which will help not only in having more people earning an income, but create a tax revenue of some sort. We must think about the future of saying vehicles in townships can be repaired in townships. But I don't want to just stop at saying the township economy can create a job in every home, but let's create a job closer to home. Now, I was thinking about what additional incentives could we do. Imagine if we said data prices in townships will become cheaper, and we'll give you the incentive for that. Municipalities said your electrical costs, if you set up a manufacturing plant in the township, those will become cheaper. We used Eskom's rebate programs to say, rather than giving people other incentives, let's make it easier to trade in the township. If you were telling a business that was manufacturing, that was making things, that if you move your business from this former area and put it in a township where people work closer to it, they are closer to home, they can ensure that they minimize how much money they spent in transport going into towns, etc. They can literally work closer to home. We will give you additional incentives, cheaper access to water, cheaper access to electricity, cheaper digital infrastructure. I long for the days where townships can run call centers, can run manufacturing plants of kettles and microwaves. This is technology that's old. We can manufacture it in the township so that we stop only having an economy in the township, but an economy from the township, so that goods can be exported elsewhere. So let's not waste this crisis by simply creating a narrow focus on saying, well, we will sort out immigrants by being able to decide which ones can be registered or not. That is such an archaic debate. Of course, people must be registered legally, etc. But let's build further. Lastly, the reason why people operate in the informal sector of the economy is because you don't want to burden them with regulation. You can give them cumbersome laws to do. And I've been looking at this registration process as to what documents a spaza shop needs to produce. It is going to become complicated. Because let me give you another parallel sector, the ECD sector. The government went out and said all ECDs must be registered, which is a noble ambition. But then they prescribed some things that are very impractical. They said, how many bathrooms you need per child and all of those kinds of regulations. Today, ECD centers are not registered. The National Lotteries has opened an opportunity for people to be able to get grant beneficiary from the National Lotteries. Their target is 3,000 to get people registered so they can get money from the state. Only 117 or so are only been compliant recently, which tells you that the compliance component amongst the informal sector is a burdensome issue, and people just eventually don't do it, and they carry on. Even when there's an immediate benefit for them, they can't access it because it's cumbersome regulations. Let's make regulations easier. Let's dream of different townships. Let's not make townships what Verwoerd wanted, dormitories of unemployment. Let's make townships vibrant, alive. Because I tell you, if you ask me what's the best place to eat chisanyama, I wouldn't say Sandton or anywhere formalized. I'd say Aregokasi, bro. If you wanted to ask me what happens when there's a football match and the ecosystem around it, where you will find it's best cooked from the side of the road. If we formalize that, help it work better, sanitized, all of that, we could really become vibrant. It is true not only for South Africa, it's true for other parts of the world. If you go to Thailand, you go to different parts, you get there, people are cooking on the side of the road, doing it properly, and it is often better to have Thai food from the side of the road than it is to do it anywhere else. So let us dream big. Let us have ICT centers. Let us have manufacturing plants in townships so that we could build an economy of the future in townships, because this country desperately needs one. And so, as far as registration is gone, I don't think we'll hit the 21 days. I think it might need to be extended. And I think we need to make sure that where there's food in the townships, it is done so safely. I do want to, just in closing of this conversation, send again my deep condolences to every family that's lost their loved one, in especially children. Children should not be dying in townships. And I was thinking about this a number of years ago when I was a councillor in the city of Johannesburg. People in Alexandra complained about rats. The government knew that there was a problem with rats. But instead of doing anything practical to solve the situation, they tried some things, and when they didn't succeed, they just said townships and people must be on their own. Because poor people in this country live in absolute squalor. And so the net effect of it is that not only do you have bad water, you've got bad sewage system, you've got bad infrastructure, of course it creates spaces for rats. What do citizens do? They go buy rat poison. They go buy all of that to try and just defend themselves so that they can live with a sense of dignity. So yes, it is wrong that rat poison comes into contact with food. But let's also deal with the broader issues. Let us fix the squalor upon which people our South African citizens are living in. To tell you the truth, I am so angry at our poor conversation around poverty that I often wonder what the best punishment for all of those who stole money during state capture. And I honestly think part of the best punishment would be to say, let us allow you to go live in an informal settlement. That after state capture, that's where you should go do. Because if you were to live in an informal settlement at this stage, you live with poor water, you share toilets with 4 other shacks, because that's what the ratio says. You end up with children who are sick because they are drinking water that is bad. And so let us reflect deeply as a country to say, yes, we have a crisis with children dying, but the conditions where poor South Africans are living in are about desperate, poor, and are actually dangerous for our people. So let's think through these things and build a future that is different for all South Africans.